guys, my name is Joe and welcome to Fighting Words, the martial arts library. And on this channel I review martial arts books and talk about other martial arts related subjects. Today I'm going to be reviewing The Martial Arts of Ancient Greece, written by Kostas Divinis and Nektarios Kidiadopoulos. I'm sure I butchered both their names. It was originally published in 2005. The English copy was published in 2007. This is the result of suggestions from viewers. So if you would like to suggest something for me, take a look at my Ko-fi account. You can donate to it, please. And anyway, for a bit of a background on the authors, they each have a background primarily in East Asian martial arts. They are heavily invested in the recreation of traditional Hellenistic martial arts. Now, very early on, the authors distinguish between Pankration and what they call Pankration, which again I might be mispronouncing, so this is how it's spelled. And they point out that Pankration is more of a sport combat, whereas Pankration would be what we would probably consider military combatives. So, you know, fighting arts to the death, but are meant to be used for military purposes. They even cite some examples, some quotes from contemporary sources that suggests that Pankration was more about skill rather than a blood sport. Now, in this book, a lot of the early chapters focus on providing a historical context, and these cover a broad range of topics. Among them are the differentiation between what we might consider social sport and warfare, which is the difference between Pankration and Pankration. They also cover things like the development of blades from prehistory and then into the Greek era. Also covered in this section will be historical terminology, like why was the term Pankration used, and they really try to dissect the definition of it here. The majority of the book is Chapter 3, actually. Chapter 3 is where they analyze the techniques from contemporary sources. So to that end, they will use, for instance, illustrations from murals, from vases, you know, art on vases, sculptures, and they don't stay isolated to ancient Greece. They will also look for similar works of art in Rome, and they actually wind up using the wrestling fresco in the Beni Hassan tombs in Egypt, which are about 4,000 years old. They use those for a good chunk of their ground fighting techniques. Now, by way of analysis, what they will do is they will present the work of art, and then they will present a contemporary application in the form of black and white photographs. So, for instance, you know, you might have something like, here's what happens when you catch a kick. Here it is in the old murals, and here we are replicating that motion or updating it. Now, this chapter actually clocks in at 152 pages. It's actually about as thorough a job, I guess, as one could do with the material that they're given. Now, it starts off by covering different ranges, so it will discuss things in terms of punching, and then kicking, and then wrestling, which upright grappling, and also ground. The kicking section primarily focuses on front kick variations. To be honest, I was having a little bit of trouble distinguishing some of their kicks from each other, but you will get in this section, as I said, a variety of front kicks, stomping kicks, thrusting kicks. Nothing in the way of like side kicks or round kicks. You will also see some of the defenses, because each chapter covers usually defense as well as offense, although defense overall is a little bit lacking. They're just pulling from contemporary sources, and I guess defense doesn't show up quite as much. Concerning the kicking defenses, a lot of times you will get a throw or a sweep from a caught kick. So we will see, again, usually illustrated, someone catching the kick in the illustration, and then usually in the contemporary interpretation of it, you will see that followed up with some sort of foot sweep. When they move on to the punching section, we see that they're making a note that the position for launching these punching attacks typically looks like what you would see if someone had like an overhand dagger shot, or if they were throwing a javelin or something like that. So it's a lot of this sort of chambered overhead type of position. You know, we do see that show up a lot in the illustrations that they present to us. Primarily they show punches. Most of these are going to be straight. There are a few hooking punches. They also show different hand forms. For instance, what they refer to as an axe hand with the edge of the hand. Although, something I'll get to when I get to the pros and cons section, I think that the action that they assume is that axe hand is open for a lot of interpretation. Also in this section they will discuss things like nerve holds, again sort of dubious based on some of the illustrations, but they will also discuss striking with things like the fingertips or the extended knuckles in this. Once we get past the punching section, we're getting into the wrestling section. Now this isn't simply throws and foot sweeps from a wrestling tie-up. This will also include things like striking in the clinch. So we will see things like throwing elbows and knees from various tie-ups. We'll get shots from the outside. They include a sprawl here in their defensive section. Again, I find it sort of dubious to try to link it back to what we see in the contemporary illustrations of the techniques. But in addition to that, we will also get things like standing throws and locks and standing chokes. We will also get some different controls and transitions that you would find in things like wrestling and Muay Thai, moving from one control position to the next. And finally we get into the ground fighting section. Largely it's taken from Roman and Egyptian sources, which is interesting because, again, the book is meant to focus on the Greek art of pankration as it was practiced, thousands of years ago. They will try to link back the idea of, well, all these Mediterranean sources had contact with one another, so if it's here, they also probably knew it over here. I would not be as confident to make that claim, but that's what they decided to go with. And in the ground fighting section, we do see some things that we would recognize today from contemporary submission grappling, contemporary mixed martial arts from our era. I think that some of the things they do are a little bit dubious, but by and large they will be familiar to people who practice or who follow these different methods. Finally, in chapter 4, we get into what the authors refer to as the inner path. For me, it seems like their training in Eastern martial arts is really influencing how they view it looks like they're looking for an internal side to Western martial arts that I think that they're sort of stretching for. And that's me editorializing a bit. But the book itself will actually cover things like the role of female wisdom and how by suppressing one's sexual urges you can turn that energy into another form of energy, which I think is dubious when it comes to things like biology and physics. But there you go. If you're into that stuff, they have a chapter on it. Finally, we get an appendix which tries to link the concept of Zen with Greece, and I think it's an interesting thought exercise. I'm not sold on it, personally, but there we go. As far as the pros go, I would say that the biggest pro is that we get to see this breadth of historical fighting material. And while I do think that some of their interpretations would not be the interpretations I would make, I think that it's valuable for us to see a collection of this material and the interpretations of modern martial artists. I think that whole section has value whether or not you even agree with their interpretations, because I definitely am getting something out of just looking at the vast amount of historical material that they have. As far as the cons go, as I mentioned, I think there's a lot that's open to interpretation. For instance, we have that section where they're like, well, this is clearly an axe hand to the side of the neck. I'm like, that looks like it could be a palm strike to the face. That it's open to interpretation, man. You know, there are a few things like that. You know, one instance they interpret something as striking with the extended knuckles. I'm not sure that I would interpret that as the same thing that they're seeing. Also, that nerve hold, like, I don't know, it just looks like somebody's trying to push off of somebody else. I don't know if that's a nerve hold. I also think that toward the end of it, there's too much woo, too much speculation, you know, not a whole lot that's grounded in reality. As well, it's got like a weirdly possessive tone to it in some places. You know, like, well, we use the term Pankration, and if you see anybody else using that term, they're not using it. And if you see anybody practicing Pankration this way, it's not real Pankration. Only our way is real Pankration. You know, which sort of off-putting, frankly. All right, as far as recommendations go, I would say in general, if you have an interest in the historical martial arts of Europe, if you're interested in kind of rare martial arts, I think that this would be a decent source for that. Like I said, I thoroughly enjoyed being exposed to the breadth of the historical techniques that they were showing, and I appreciate that they organized them in order based on range, even though I don't necessarily agree with range. Let's call it skill set. You know, the skill set of kicking, the skill set of hand strikes, the skill set of clinch fighting, the skill set of ground fighting. Again, I appreciate that they had all that organized. And there are some parts of it historically that even if I'm unsure of, I at least have a starting point if I want to do more research. So I appreciate that they, you know, would cite some of their sources, if not all of them. I also think if you are of the similar persuasion that they are, that, you know, there's like some deep internal component to everything, that you will probably appreciate the last chapter of the book. So even if I don't appreciate it, you might, and that's fine. We don't all have to like the same thing. So yeah, that's all I got for now. I appreciate you sticking with me. Once again, if you have a suggestion for a book for me to review, or you just like to help out the channel, because I'm not making any money off of this, please consider donating to my Ko-fi account. The link will be in the description. And I'll see you guys next week. Thank you.